Hello and welcome to Eye on Africa here on France 24. I'm Clarisse Fortuné, and first the headlines. They're invited back home. Mali, Niger and Burkina Faso will attend an ECOWAS extraordinary summit months after formally exiting the regional bloc. It's part of Ghana's efforts to reintegrate the leaders of the Alliance of Sahel states. Uganda's government is proposing a new law to allow military courts to try civilians for certain offences, just 2 weeks after the Supreme Court ruled against the practice. Critics say it's a threat to civil rights. Angélique Kidjo, Himra, Josey and Takana Zion, some of the big names at Ivory Coast Music Festival. Our reporter got a glimpse backstage. Ghana's President John Mahama has extended an invitation to the military leaders of Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger to attend next week's 50th anniversary celebration of ECOWAS, taking place in Accra. The three Sahelian nations withdrew from the regional bloc after facing suspension threats following military takeovers. Since taking office in January, President Mahama has made restoring ties with these countries a top priority. Here's more from our Ghana correspondent, Justice Baidu.
Accra is set to take the center stage next week as the Economic Community of West African States marks 50 years of its formation. The city would be hosting high-ranking officials and leaders invited from across the sub-region in a move that has drawn some level of critique from democracy watchers. President John Mahama has extended an invitation to the leaders of Burkina Faso, Niger and Mali, the nations that withdrew from the bloc to set up the Alliance of Sahelian States. Ghana has already appointed an envoy to repair relations between the country and these three states. ECOWAS insists that it took the decision to suspend these countries to stem the tide in the wave of coup takeovers that was sweeping across the sub-region around the time. Ghana sees itself as a strategic ally to these three countries, and new President John Mahama has insisted that it is in its interest that it fosters collaborations with these countries to help fight terrorism and promote economic cooperation.
Rwanda has agreed to let troops from the Southern African Development Community pass through its territory as they withdraw from Eastern Congo. The regional force was deployed in 2023 to support Congo's fight against rebel groups. Their exit comes as the rebel M23 group continues to hold key eastern cities. Diplomats say the troops' weapons will be sealed for security as they travel through Rwanda to Tanzania. The Ugandan government is looking to introduce a new law that would allow military tribunals to try civilians for certain offences, despite the Supreme Court recently banning the practice. Human rights activists and opposition leaders have long accused President Yoweri Museveni's government of using military courts to target political opponents. The government has consistently denied those claims. More with our correspondent in the region, Juliette Montilly.
Uganda's Minister of Justice told lawmakers that the draft law is ready and now awaits cabinet approval before being brought to parliament. He said it would outline, quote, exceptional circumstances under which a civilian may be subject to military law, without giving any further detail. The announcement comes just months after Uganda's Supreme Court ruled to bar military courts from trying civilians, a decision that forced the government to move the case of four-time presidential candidate Kizza Besigye to a civilian court. Besigye, a long-time political rival of President Museveni, faces death penalty on charges his legal team says are politically driven. If passed, the new law could return his case back to a military tribunal. The Foundation for Human Rights Initiative in Uganda told France 24 that this is a clear example of politically motivated legislation. They believe the bill is likely to pass in Parliament, where the ruling party holds a strong majority. For critics of President Museveni, who's ruled Uganda since 1986, this is yet another step towards deepening authoritarianism ahead of next year's election.
Banks and gas stations across Mali shut down on Thursday as workers launched a 72-hour strike. The union behind the action, Sinabef, is demanding the release of 3 arrested members and better working conditions. Talks with the government have stalled, though officials say negotiations are still ongoing. The strike, which began in the capital Bamako, could extend another 5 days if demands are met.
We're customers. If the banks are in conflict with another entity and the courts have ruled, I think they should turn to the justice system. We make deposits and withdrawal operations, and I believe we should not have to suffer as a result.
If the heads of the banks are having difficulties with the state or with any institution, that's not our concern. The trust we placed in their banks is what should always prevail. It is irresponsible to close a bank.
A week ago, Zimbabwe's government announced an initial payout of $3 million to white farmers whose farms were seized more than 20 years ago. But according to a compensation steering committee, only a small fraction of white farmers have received compensation. More than 2 decades ago, more than 4,000 farmers lost their land to black counterparts amid the land reforms of then-President Robert Mugabe. The $3.1 million payment covers just 378 of those affected farmers.
We were basically 4,500 farmers evicted. I think it's like 117 or something that have accepted and started getting small payments. I think there's another 250 odd that are looking at maybe on the second tranche of accepting and hopefully getting a bit of money.
The African Football Confederation has fined its president's club $100,000 after violent fan clashes at an African Champions League game. Mamelodi Sundowns, owned by Patrice Motsepe, breached safety rules hosting a game against Esperance of Tunisia. Esperance was fined also $150,000. Both clubs have qualified for this year's expanded FIFA Club World Cup in the US, kicking off in June. In Kenya's Kakuma refugee camp, dozens of teenage girls take Taekwondo classes twice a week, a way to learn to defend themselves and to reduce vulnerability to gender-based violence. Laurent Berstecher has the story.
In this gym, around 80 teenage girls practice a series of precise movements under the watchful eye of their instructor. Caroline Ambani is a Taekwondo black belt and has been teaching this Korean martial art to the young women of Kakuma refugee camp for the past 3 years.
What we are teaching these girls is basically to maintain discipline, to maintain calmness, to maintain focus, and to be able to assess situations.
Ismail Mohammed arrived in Kenya 15 years ago after fleeing violence in Burundi. His 2 twin daughters grew up in this camp and quickly had to learn to defend themselves, especially the youngest, Salha, who was born deaf and mute.
My daughter had to face many challenges in this camp. She already got beat up because she couldn't communicate with others. But now she no longer gets bullied and she can stand up for herself.
Kakuma is Kenya's second largest refugee camp and is home to over 300,000 people. A chaotic environment that often leaves women exposed to gender-based violence and where safe spaces for girls are few and far between.
The project was designed based on the data that showed high levels of vulnerability to GBV, especially amongst adolescent girls. We're extremely happy about the results that have been achieved just within the last 3 years.
After 3 years, the program will soon come to an end and might not be renewed due to lack of funding. Yet many girls say they want to continue to practice Taekwondo and maybe one day become black belts themselves.
And now to Ivory Coast. The FEMUA's main event is set to begin this Friday with the first part of the A-list singers set to take to the stage. Abidjan is buzzing with excitement. That's what Clémence Valère tells us.
Abidjan residents and festival music goers are eagerly awaiting the main event of the FEMUA Music Festival, which are the free concerts performed by A-listers. The final sound checks are being done. Earlier in the day, I spoke to several passers-by who told me who they were eagerly awaiting to see take to the stage. Some said Himra, others said Caris. I got a chance to speak to one of the Ivorian rappers who will be performing later on Friday evening. His name is Lil J Binjarak, traditional pop Ivorian rapper. Let's take a listen.
I'm very, very happy. This proves that we have done a good job in the last 2 years. We were part of the emergent artists scene 2 years ago, and we've come a long way since then. And now we're on the main stage. This proves that we've worked well, and we're happy to be here.
And of course, gracing the stage later this evening is 5-time Grammy Award winner Angélique Kidjo, who is known for her works promoting African musical talent around the world. And she told me what she thought of the FEMUA Music Festival.
There's a purpose behind it. There is a will for something to be celebrated, great as music to be celebrated on the continent. Not only that it's a musical festival, it's also have a component of social engagement. We cannot just be doing a musical festival without acknowledging the tragedies, things that we have to change.
And as we just heard, the FEMUA is not just concerned with providing the people of Abidjan with 3 days of intense musical nights, but also has a social active mission. This year, the main theme of the edition is road safety and civic responsibility.
FEMUA, a mix of new talents and big stars. This concludes our edition of Eye on Africa. Thank you for watching. More news to come.
Tech giants are snapping up Spanish land.
When people talk about the cloud, that's not an abstract thing. It's a site like this one where racks of real servers store the digital world.
The goal? To run data centers non-stop. To cool them, millions of litres of potential drinking water are needed.
According to the project, there will be 2 wells dug inside the centre, but inside there'll be no way to monitor the water extracted.
It seems nearly mad to me that there's plenty of water for some people, as much as they want.
The arrival of Amazon is a real motor for the town of Huesca. It allows us to save a lot of money.
An investigation into the arid lands of Spain in Reporters on France 24.
Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith.
All the latest in politics, economics and the arts in Africa on France 24. Our journalists are in every region, every country, to report on the emergence of a continent of unparalleled riches. Bringing you Africa's stories on France 24.
Thanks for joining us. Do so again. Take care.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.